Are you married or in a committed relationship looking for real advice on having love and enriching your relationship? You are in the right place. Welcome to The Couples Expert with Stuart Fensterheim.
Hello, and welcome to the Couples Expert podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert, coming to you on a very rainy Arizona day, which is quite unusual. We don't get that much rain here, but it gives me a great opportunity to really begin to talk to all of you today regarding a very important topic to many relationships. That's also a very tragic topic, and that's about infidelity. Infidelity, we know, is different for men and women. The first thing I'd like to do is talk a little bit about infidelity as a general topic, and then from there, break it down to some of the differences between men and women and what happens in terms of infidelity. I did a series about a year ago, and if you go back into the archives of the podcast, you should be able to find a number of podcasts on different kinds of infidelity. I did one on physical and sexual infidelity. I did one on emotional infidelity. And I believe I did 3 of them, and one of them was on financial infidelity. And they all have very similar components. So what I'm going to be talking about is something different than I spoke about on those podcasts, because you can all go back and listen to that podcast. And the only comment I want to make about that, because it was about a year ago, if I sound better now, which I hope I do, please understand. And I don't like going back listening to some of my older podcasts, because we learn and we grow as we go. So those old ones, although the content is really good, the presentation may not be as good. Anyway, let's talk about infidelity as a general topic. Before I move on, I want to just say that this podcast is being sponsored today by the 2 days and 7 conversation weekends, which I do bi-monthly. And if you want to check out that program that we offer, you can go to the website, which is www.thecouplesexperts.com. And by the way, I also would love to hear from all of you. So if you have any questions or comments, please send me an email at podcast@thecouplesexperts.com. All right, so back to this episode, which is talking about infidelity. Now, what we know about infidelity, it destroys marriages, it destroys families, and it destroys really the cornerstone of our society, which I believe very much is the couple. And when you have a violation like an infidelity, it really does havoc to really our society. This episode on my podcast is important just from the sake of understanding infidelity, but it really is something to really pay attention to, because what I really believe is you and your partner as a couple is one of the basic components of having a healthy society in which we are focused on emotional connections and helping two people have a relationship with their partner that then gets passed down to our children. Because if we have healthy relationships, they will as well. And then their children, and this really can change the nature of our society. Infidelity is one of the major causes of heartbreak, depression, and quite frankly, divorce in marriages. It has been, when we've done the research on this, one of the main root causes of the ruin and collapse of many happy marriages. It can take place in many different settings. I think sometimes people like to think of it as a sexual affair, but what we know is that infidelity, now with all the different technology that's out there, we can have a violation of trust in a relationship through telephone, through the internet. And I'm going to also include pornography, strip clubs, and massage parlors. And I am seeing many more couples coming in with those types of issues that are creating problems for the marriage. While infidelity is a choice that's relative to the particular person, it is a serious, devastating betrayal to a intimate relationship, and that when there is a third person in that kind of triangle, what we know is the emotional component of the relationship, which what we can call is a triangulation. Since you have now three people involved, all the emotional connections are difficult. What that means is I hear a lot of people talking about, I feel so close to my partner. I feel so close to the person I'm having the affair with. It doesn't compare. But what we know is that you can't have cross connections. You can't have a connection with more than one human being in the world. So if you have a connection with someone that you're having an affair with, there is no clear, complete way to have a connection with your spouse, so that both relationships end up suffering. And I think that's an important concept that I want people to understand, because what we know is that through infidelity, most people are seeking an emotional connection. So when you have that emotional connection with someone other than your spouse, it's one of the most serious relationship injuries, that violation of trust. Now, I want to make a clear statement here. Having an affair is a choice. It's a decision. There almost always are signs, and I hear people talking about, oh my God, I didn't realize this was happening, and then I'm swept away by it. That means you're blind. That means that you haven't seen the signs, because there are signs. The emotions get kicked in. There's an attraction. There's a desire that gets created. And one of the things I'm not going to talk a lot about today, because I talked about this in my last few podcasts on infidelity. If you begin to feel attracted to someone, it behooves you to look at your partner square in the eye and say, we're in trouble. I'm having feelings outside our marriage. Now, that's a huge thing to say to somebody, but it's nowhere as big as turning to a partner and saying, I'm having an affair. I'm scared of having an affair. I'm feeling emotions for someone else. I want us to deal with this right now so it doesn't become more than this. And I'm letting you in on it. Although that's a huge risk, it's less of a problem than turning to your partner and saying, I'm in the middle of an affair. I don't believe affairs are a mistake. We know that affairs are not about sex. They're about emotion. They're about a desire to do away with loneliness. So the conversation with your partner has to be about, I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling empty. I'm feeling like my needs aren't being met here. And I want to work really hard together so I do have my needs met. And an awareness that if your needs are not being met, I guarantee you, your partner's needs are not being met. So the conversation then becomes, what about you too? How do you feel like we're doing? What can I do as your partner to make it so that your needs are being met as well as mine? If it's about a lack of intimacy, you can have a conversation about that. You can work on that. You can seek help for that. Infidelity is one of the most difficult challenges that any marriage or committed relationship can have. It's one of the toughest things to recover from. But recovery from an infidelity is possible. And we'll be talking about that as we move on here. But for the most part, I want to send the message, It's a horrible thing for any relationship to go through, but it's definitely something you can heal from, recover from, and create a new kind of relationship for you and your partner. It also creates havoc for your mental health. So not only does it have a relational issue, it has a very deep, vulnerable personal issue, particularly if we're talking about people who have had these experiences previous in their life. What I find quite interesting when we start talking about infidelity, I think we're talking about a whole generational issue, an issue that's about if there's someone in the family, in your family of origin, that has had an affair. My experience, and this is not a research thing that I'm talking about, but it is a most interesting thing for me as a couples counselor, because when I talk with people where affairs have gone on, it is almost half, if not more, of those folks had family members, parents, siblings who also had affairs. So there's a component here that does say that if you deal with these issues now, you can stop an entire generation from having these kinds of difficulties. It needs to be looked at very seriously. Okay. Here are some facts about infidelity. It's an astounding statistic. The polls that they've done have showed that although 90% of people disapprove of infidelity, we know that 15% of women and 25% of husbands have had extramarital affairs. The numbers increase by 20% if we add emotional affairs into the mix. And that's without intercourse. The latest information that I was reading as I was doing some research for this suggests that 60% of husbands, 40% of wives will likely have an affair at some time in their marriage. Now, I want you to keep all of that in mind here. And now what I'm going to do is break down for you some of the differences for men and for women. But before we do that, I want to let our sponsors, the 2 days and 7 conversation weekends, have a brief time to talk about the program. It's true. You don't have to give up on your relationship or settle for feeling lost or as if something is missing. You just need to know how to connect with your partner in a way that allows the two of you to feel loved and appreciated. But the problem is that many couples don't have the tools they need to navigate the ups and downs of a relationship without causing relationship injuries to one another. Yet they wonder what happened to the friendship that you used to share. How did it get from where it was in the beginning of the relationship to where you are now, feeling alone, disappointed, and hurt? And yet, you just can't seem to move forward to be happy again. Thankfully, this problem can be fixed, and that's where the 2 days and 7 conversation Hold Me Tight workshop comes in. Just 2 days, you will understand what you and your partner need to have a relationship where both of you are on the same page, working together to have that close relationship you only once dreamed of. Check it out at www.thecouplesexperts.com. Your relationship deserves the two of you feeling that closeness you once had. What we know about the differences between men and women with regards to infidelity is that men tend to compartmentalize relationships, and sex without intimacy is a casual affair. More men would say that they don't want that. They prefer the emotional, but they're very accepting to the casual affairs. But men in particular would say that they don't want to end their significant relationship with their wives or girlfriends, even if they've been tempted to have a sexual relationship. Many women would have a different approach, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for men, many men would say that the cheating is primarily for sexual urges, and that many men will cheat even if they have a significant emotional relationship. The preference would be to have both, but men are much more accepting of just having the sexual relationship without the emotions. The relationship can often be saved after an infidelity because there's not that emotional betrayal present to the same degree as when women cheat. There is a perception that men are hardwired to be sexual and to continue to see the sexual potential in others even after they're in stable emotional relationships. I would have a disagreement in that concept because from my experience in my office and what I've seen over the 30 years is that men in particular have as strong of a need for that emotional, happy relationship, but they don't access it as much. And that when we begin to process things, it turns out that they're looking for very similar things. One of the newer things that I'm finding in the office is I'm seeing more people who the infidelities tend to be starting out in places like massage parlors and strip clubs, some prostitution. And I recently had a phone call from a client who was seeking help. He didn't end up coming in to see me, but what was very fascinating about this call is it was so complicated. The complication of it was about the call went something like this. He was picked up the phone to call me seeking help. And when I asked him what the problem was, he said he had, for the first time in his life, reached out and gone to a massage parlor that turned out to be a place where there was prostitution going on. The police raided the place and he was arrested as soliciting. He now had to go home and tell his wife, not only was he in a place like that, but he now has this police record, and he said they're having a fair amount of marital problems. No kidding. Those are the kinds of things that are happening and do happen. We don't hear a lot about that. And I think we want to really talk about that our behaviors have a ripple effect on so many people in your life. And you need to be careful that when you have these kinds of desires, you have to recognize how dangerous they are. There was a survey done recently of 2,000 men and women and found that there were some clear differences in why men and women cheat and what it means for them. Here's some of the reasons that men cheat. Men cheat because they are sexually attracted to someone. They couldn't resist the fact that someone was hitting on them, that there were particular sexual acts that their wife would not engage in because this opportunity came up unexpected and he couldn't pass it up. Think about all those things. What is not in this list was what I believe is much more the case, which is a void of the emotional connection, because I don't think men talk as much about that as they do about the sexual acts. For women, what we know is that infidelity quite often is a life changer. It's a line in the sand. It's a deal breaker. One of the big differences, though, that when women cheat, there's much more of an element of romance and intimacy, and the affairs are much more emotional in nature. Since 1990, Esther Perel has been studying this, and she reports that the rate of married women who report they've been unfaithful have increased by about 40%, while the rate of men is about the same as it's always been. Intimacy and emotional connections are more important to women, and there's a great deal of thought that go into a woman deciding to have sex with another man. there are far more long-term risks for her than for men, particularly if we're looking at things like getting pregnant, diseases, children, family relationships. They seem to have a higher value for women in terms of their desiring to have an affair. Women are more likely to cheat when the current relationship's not going well. If you remember, I was saying that for men, they tend to be able to say, my relationship is fine, but there's just these elements, so I'm going to have this affair just because of that. For women, that happens less often. More women cheat when their relationship isn't going well. Women, however, are more likely to get emotionally close to someone, and that then leads to the infidelity. The emotional infidelity that occurs more often for women than for men, according to some of the research, means that your partner has let someone else into their heart and mind. They've developed this strong bond, and they've shared more of the intimate thoughts and secrets than they have with you. And that's the real betrayal here. They've told their lover things they haven't told you. And that's the trauma. That's the real injury here. The injury here is about someone in my life is sharing things with someone else rather than choosing to share it with me. And how do I get over that? How do I get over the fact that they preferred someone else to talk to than talk to me? And for a lot of men, the ego of that fact gets in the way of them being able to heal. Here are some of the reasons that women tend to cheat. They feel that their partner has stopped giving them attention. Friendship with someone became a close emotional attachment. There's a resentment that's built up regarding their role in their relationship, and that the partner might view them as just someone to watch the kids, clean the house, and meet their needs. We see more in the research that women's choices to have an affair is actually a reflection on them having a lower self-esteem. Sex is an issue for women as well, not enough sex. And then sometimes what we find in the research is that the affair is about a revenge affair regarding a partner that's had the infidelity. Now, the message for this podcast, more than anything, is that we have a lot of these issues going on, but healing and recovery is possible. As I said in the beginning of the podcast, infidelity is one of the most traumatic things of any relationship's experience. But I believe identifying the emotional and spiritual and character conflicts that contribute to the infidelity can be talked about in counseling. I've said this over and over again, and I want to repeat it here. If infidelity of any form is part of your relationship, you will not be able to heal this by yourselves. Not reading books, not going to workshops. It's going to require you getting in to see a counselor who is an expert on an attachment-based model. And because of that, they will be able to help you figure out the attachment needs that are missing. And the work is about reshaping your relationship. What it's not about, and so often this is the danger for not getting the help, it's not about going back to how it was before. Because what you had before is susceptible to an affair. You have to create something you've never had, a truly secure, stable relationship where both of you feel like every single one of your main attachment needs are being met by this particular person, and that you and your partner have taken the journey, and I jokingly call this, and I've been talking a lot about this, taking the journey to attachment land. Attachment land is a glorious place where two people are present together taking the journey together on a mission to have both of you feel loved and to be attached closer than any other person in your entire life ever. And that's going to take the two of you working as a team with your attachment land guide, the therapist. And then ultimately you'll be able to fire the guide because you'll have the knowledge that you need to journey through attachment land on your own. That healing is possible, but it's having to grieve for the relationship you once had, the dreams you had, and recognizing that that dream is at an end. There is a lot of sadness there, but it's not totally sad because life takes many forms and we have many chapters. The chapter you want to get to is the chapter which would be the best chapter in your life, where the two of you are truly together, having the most incredible relationship you ever had. Marital infidelity is the most traumatic life experience you'll probably ever have. The profound wounds is similar to a post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's going to have flashbacks and it's going to have all the things that are going to get in the way of your closeness. And that's why the therapy is so critical. There is a life after infidelity, though. It begins with you understanding what happened. And the two of you, and this I have found, this is pretty an amazing thing that I have found, that most couples who have come in to see me, and I would say up in the neighborhood of over 50%, come in and say to me when we're getting ready to finish the work we've done, and they're both securely attached again, they don't want to say it was a good thing. But for the most part, they're saying, we're glad it happened. We wish it hadn't, but we're pleased it did because what it did is open both of our eyes to what was missing. And now we have a relationship that's even better than what we had. Think about that. To be able to go through a journey with your partner with such wrenching, painful experiences and coming out on the other side and being able to say, we did it together. And the love that we have is stronger. Our need is being met. Our eyes are open. I see my partner for who they truly are, authentically, transparently, and I don't have anyone else in my world that I love more. If you could do that, you'll reflect back on the past pain and say, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on our present, which is so damn good. Take care now. We'll see you next time, and please stay connected. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?